Hello there. I couldn't figure out why the Democratic Party would select Joe Biden, given his cognitive difficulties. Not to mention he's a terrible candidate, he's run many times before, but you all know that. Why would you pick someone who is so obviously has cognitive difficulties? Not all the time, mind you, but that's what happens when a person is gotten older and they have a little bit of dementia or senile dementia, which he does have, no question. I'm familiar with that. In the last 2 months of my husband's life, he started losing cognitive capability, but it's not constant. It changes, but it's a steady decline. So whatever you have now, if you could just freeze it, well, maybe he could survive. But you don't. It gets worse and worse and worse, and it accelerates. It goes faster. So what could the Democratic Party be thinking of? It didn't make sense to me. But now I realize, this is my speculation, that it's all about who the vice presidential pick is. And that becomes very important. Very important, more so than usual. Because if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris got elected, she would become the president. What would you do? Either he would step down, or they could declare the 25th Amendment. It's an amendment to our Constitution. If the president cannot carry out his duties, then his cabinet or whomever, they vote to put him out. Remember, they even talked about doing that with President Trump, which was so ridiculous. They can put that person out, and then the vice president becomes the president. So you have to think of Kamala Harris as the oligarchs in the party have chosen for you to be president. Because remember, she ran in the Democratic primary. There were a lot of candidates, but she had to drop out. I think it was 2 months before the Iowa caucuses. Because there was some excitement. She had a very good kind of rollout, and then she just tanked. And as I observed her, this is what I saw. I saw someone that, why is she running? What is her reason for being president? To be a leader, you have to have a reason. She would just talk about, I'm a woman and have this little girl and this minority woman, that she could become president. That is not a reason to pick somebody for president. It's really disgusting when you think about it. Disgusting that Joe Biden and the Democratic Party locked themselves into saying it has to be a woman of color. That's what you pick for the President of the United States? It's all about identity politics? I find that just disgusting. And I'm sure you do too. Now, the Democrats didn't like her. Now, why was that? When it gets right down to it, many people vote for a president based on their gut feelings about someone. And I used to think that was a problem because you're not using your head, you're not thinking logically. But now I see that as a big strength, because most people are pretty smart in seeing a person's character or seeing who they are. Obviously just someone with a good character, even that's not enough. You've got to be knowledgeable, et cetera, et cetera. But when I look at Kamala Harris, there were a couple things that really, really bothered me from the get-go. She's definitely attractive. I listened to her, first speech on television. I was kind of dismayed she looked and sounded very good. Not if you dug deeper into what she said, but how she presented herself was good. But that's not enough, so there's no questions, they don't take questions. But what I don't like, and what I didn't like during the campaign, was she was so cavalier about making rules. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. She's like a little dictator. And maybe you noticed that too. And then she would have that laugh, like it was nothing. And I thought, you can't do that. I mean, even something as simple as somebody asked her a question about plastic straws, should they be banned? Now, first of all, why would you do that on a federal level? But she said, well, yes, I think I would ban them. And I thought, who the hell do you think you are that you would just do that to the American people, to the economy? I mean, it's like, I'll just do it, people. Now, if you go back and look, there's a huge history of her using the Attorney General. I mean, certainly in the climate area, the climate alarmist area. She was part of the Attorney Generals who tried to, she would actually want to put climate denialists like me or whatever in jail. People who question the science. I mean, it's like using the power of the state to shut people up. So that's something else. But here's something I found personally interesting, if you will. I also talked to my friend Kamela Harris, who we've been friends since we were 17, and we met in Algebra 2. We talked too much until the teacher moved us. But then we were roommates when I was at Cal Poly Pomona, and she was getting a master's in public administration, I think. But anyway, I was just FaceTiming with her, and I forgot exactly what she had done, so I asked her to write it down. She was a legislative assistant on the Senate Rules Committee staff. This is in California, from 1981 to 1982. She worked for the president of the state Senate, at that time David Roberti, and at that time Willie Brown, infamous Willie Brown, served as Speaker of the Assembly, a very powerful position that he held for 15 years. So in California politics, Marianne Razzo, one of my great friends on this channel, she always has interesting tidbits, so I'm going to be interested in hearing what you have to say, Marianne, about all this, because she knows San Francisco and Bay Area politics like nobody else. But anyway, here's what I asked Pamela to write this down for me. One day I walked into my office to find Willie Brown sitting on my desk, dressed in his customary flamboyant style. It was summer, so we were not in session, and everyone was more laid back and casual, but Willie's outfits became even more expressive. My first impression was that he was dressed like a clown. I recall a very nice jumper, way too nice to be called overalls, and a loud colored shirt of different primary colors. Well, Pamela's trying to be nice here, but what she told me on the FaceTime, he looked like a pimp, okay? And he had the pompous personality to go with it. But there he was sitting on my desk. He could have at least jumped off when I walked in. The tremendous power he held allowed him the freedom to behave in an outrageous manner, as if he was above all the rules, and I was rankled by his gall. I found him to be revolting. And my friend Pamela ended up leaving that position due to things she didn't like that was going on. She's a very high moral character, and sooner than I did, she became a conservative, probably in the late 80s. Took me longer. Anyway, Pamela. Well, here's the interesting thing about Kamala Harris. I know people want to talk about, let's not talk about the fact that she had an affair, or she was the girlfriend of Willie Brown. She was 29 years old, and he was 60. Now, one of the reasons that's kind of interesting to me is when I met my husband, and we didn't date very long before we got married, but we got married when I was 30 and he was 58. And he was in a powerful position as well. So I'm looking at what's the difference between what she did and what I did. Okay, now he was still married to his wife, because one of the things I'm noticing is they're kind of cleaning it up in my mind. They're sort of scrubbing it. Like, no, he was well separated from his wife at the time. And so, she was his official girlfriend, and people thought they were going to get married, and like it was a legitimate thing. But here's if you read the story, it just has sleaze written all over it. And the reason why I think this is important is because I see a woman, a person who has no core, but just is ambitious, just wants to advance herself. Literally, she has no core. And the reason I say that is because, for example, in the 1990s, she was like tough on crime, okay? And you can read all about how she locked up all these marijuana, people who just smoked marijuana, whatever. I mean, because that was popular at the time. And same with Joe Biden. It was very popular in the 1990s to be anti-crime. So she chose the position that would advance her career. And now that it's no longer popular, she's gone completely in the other direction, the defund police and all that stuff. So there's no core there. Same with Joe Biden. They're empty vessels, which makes them very dangerous, because who is really running the show here, people? Who is really running the show? But let me tell you, despite what you may see, she was a deputy district attorney, okay? Now, I'm not going to say anything about being with somebody older, because even though I never dated older men, Harold was just so amazing to me. But here's the difference. I was very paranoid, you might say. I did not want anyone to know that we were dating. Okay, and he was a widower. He'd been a widower for 15 years. So it's not like I was interfering with a marriage. But at first I thought maybe secretly he'd be my mentor, just because it was just such a thrill. I'd been hearing about him, I knew about him. Just to know this person, have dinner with him, talk, but I just fell in love. And so we had our first date in November of 1983, November 9th, 1983, and we were married May 5th, 1984, and we managed to keep it a secret. I remember I told the project leader of a project, the Inmarsat satellite system project I was working on, and I said, Doug, I'm getting married tomorrow. And he said, oh, really, Deborah, that's fantastic. I had no idea. Who, anybody I know? And I whispered, Harold Rosen. And he goes, no, really, who are you marrying? He did not believe me, because that's how high up and how revered Harold was at that company. This was Hughes Aircraft Company and the Space and Communications Group. So, and I actually didn't stay at Hughes for too long after that, because it was really important for me as a woman to not be seen as, somebody who's, sleeping her way to the top, if you will. It really bothered me. I was very much a feminist. I didn't even like the idea of a younger woman, older man. That just bothered me. And I probably would have married Harold earlier if I hadn't had that. But nonetheless, it was a big jump for me in terms of the people I met. Later, of course, I met a lot of people through politics and brought Harold along with that. So we were both, doing interesting things, bringing interesting things into our marriage, if you will. But I just read about her story, and what happened was he got her. See, we should not bail out these things. Why are these positions so high paying? I don't understand it. So Brown named attorney Kamala Harris, when it's his girlfriend, to the California Medical Assistance Commission, a job that pays $72,000 a year. This is a commission, so you're not even meeting that often. And taxpayers are paying these things, right? He also appointed Harris to the state's Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board, a lucrative position worth a further $97,088 a year. So that's a further. So you're getting these huge salaries for being on these commissions. And your boyfriend has appointed you. It's disgusting. That's disgusting. So even though he was married and he stayed in touch with his wife and they were separated, he was known as going around with his girlfriend on an arm. Sometimes his wife would be there. So if you go back to earlier articles, before she announced, and she's the vice president she'll pick, so people weren't trying to protect her, you have to read the earlier articles to see what was really going on. But I just find that, I don't know, if he's still married to her, why would you have a boyfriend? Why wouldn't you get him to divorce his wife if you're that serious? Why would you date a man who's still married? I mean, I don't get it. And he was still helping her because he later became mayor of San Francisco. And that's when they broke up, by the way. I mean, that's when everybody knew it, because he had his wife next to him. Now, why would he have his wife next to him when he was inaugurated as mayor of San Francisco, which was his next job? So he was elected, when she was elected California's Attorney General in 2010, when she ran for the Senate in 2016, Brown called on her likely opponent, Antonio Villaraigosa, to stay out of the race. So he was still helping her. And here's another interesting thing. Jeff Zucker. He's the head of CNN since January 2013. I looked it up. Head of CNN, CNN International, Headline News Network, and CNN Digital. But before that, he was the big duker at NBC, and he was the one that negotiated Trump's contract. So that's a puzzle to me. I mean, he's a family man. He was married in 1996. He has 4 children, and he suffered from colon cancer. He had a big part of his colon removed when he was young, ages 31 and 34. And in July 2018, he took a 6-week leave of absence from CNN to recover from heart surgery. And he's a real go-getter. I mean, if you just read his bio, I mean, he doesn't seem like a bad guy. But here's the thing I found. When he was CEO of NBC Universal, there's certain men, maybe? Not all men. Oh my, there's a lot of men that do not like Kamala Harris. But there's some men who just kind of fall in love with her. Like, I used to laugh when I used to watch Scott Adams, and he was saying, oh, she's very good. She'll win or do really well during the primary. I predict it. And I remember thinking, no, she won't. But he did point out and got me curious that Jeff Zucker, long ago, said he liked her. So I looked that up. And when she was a district attorney running for Attorney General of California, remember, Jeff Zucker at NBC is in New York. In 2009, he hosted a breakfast for her at Rockefeller Center. That's a really ritzy place in Manhattan. I've been there. It's like pretty cool. But this is what he said during his speech. Kamala is not just important for the city of San Francisco. the state of California, but for the entire country. So he was thinking of her as presidential material, like, let's support her now. So he sees himself as a kingmaker, or queenmaker, whatever. That's clearly what he sees. And so even though the Democratic voters rejected her, she's in this position now, and you notice CNN is wholeheartedly loving Kamala Harris. That's Jeff Zucker. That kind of creeps me out. Does he really think we're that stupid? And are we that stupid? I hope not. I hope not. Because this woman is sleaze. Okay? So they're actually trying to foist her on us as President of the United States. So I just have to trust that the American people will see through this. Because I find it disgusting. I find it icky, icky, icky. I mean, when I would listen to her, and I have huge amounts of information, but I won't read you all of it, but I've been following her, about the whole climate issue. I mean, and I'm just underlining some things about heavy-handed use of her power to advance partisan ends. Kamala Harris's conduct as California Attorney General revealed a stunning lack of concern for our First Amendment rights, as well as a troubling willingness to make heavy-handed use of her power to advance partisan ends. Anyway, she's really, really bad on climate issues. I don't know if you've heard, but apparently we have rolling blackouts across California because there's like a heat wave. It's not really that hot right now in where I live here, but it's hot in other places in California. Well, of course. Why is that a problem? Because of all the climate idiocy that we've done to the state with the renewable mandates. There is just not enough power. We know we get hot in the summer, people. We know that happens. We should have enough power, but we've even shut down our beautifully functioning nuclear power plants. Carbon-free, by the way. They've been shut down. We keep talking about, we're going to go to renewable energy, which is the worst thing. He even said some of the solar panels, because there were clouds, you can't get enough solar power to make up for the shortfall. Well, I have a generator, so I'm always going to have power. I have one of these LTE generators, and it's great. I'm not going to use any kind of solar panel powered thing, but I have to be independent of the grid. And it runs off natural gas. It's hooked up to my natural gas, so if the power goes out, 6 seconds later, I have full power. And so does my neighbor, because I hear it come on when the power's out in the neighborhood, which occasionally happens, especially during rains, because it hits the trees, and the trees fall on the power lines, and we sometimes are out of power. But the planning in California is so bad. All these states that have these renewable mandates, we're going to be zero carbon, yet they don't want nuclear power. It's ruinous to the electricity grid. Now imagine, just to point out something, if people are staying indoors or people are relying on the internet for school and it gets hot, do you know how many people can die from a heat wave if you don't have air conditioning? I mean, it's such mismanagement. It's so disgusting, okay? So, as I tell all of you, always try to make plans, what you would do. And this is what I do, okay? I make sure I have the power I need. I'm not reliant on that. And fortunately, I'm in a position to do that. But Lindsay and your family, if your power goes out in Central California, well, it's kind of like when I lived in Fresno and I left in January 1974, but I remember it would get so hot and nobody had air conditioning. We didn't have air conditioning, we had an air cooler, air cooler. But I had a Volkswagen Nobody had air conditioning in their car, unless like you had a Cadillac or something, but I didn't have air conditioning. And I distinctly remember, which was kind of interesting if you think about it, I distinctly remember sitting in my car in the parking lot at Kmart. And the thought came to me, this was in summer of 1973. I never want to spend another summer in Fresno. And you know, I didn't. But I had no idea at the time how that would happen. I didn't have plans to join the Air Force. I was going to college at Fresno State University. But life is interesting that way. It was such a powerful feeling, and it worked. So when you have a thought like that, it might be God or the universe telling you something, or your inner knowing. Here's another thing you notice about, you know, as many of you know, I was before a feminist, what I call the second wave feminist, and I'm very glad about the civil rights era, and I'm very glad we have women's rights, and I am glad that gays can marry. That's it. The rest of it is too much. Too much. It's crazy. It's not right. So I'm against all that. But here's the thing. It occurred to me that in a way, Kamala Harris reminds me of Elizabeth Warren. So what did Elizabeth Warren do? Elizabeth Warren made a big deal about her Native American heritage. And that actually helped her, I don't know if it was Harvard or something, get in. She was listed like their first Native American whatever. I mean, they were using their identity politics to get ahead. I don't like that. I don't want people to be, discriminated against because they're a particular identity, but I don't want them to get special favors. But they used it as a special favor. They made use of that. Well, Kamala Harris, I look at her. Now, I can't speak, I'm not I'm not part of the black group or African American, but she looks like a white woman with a tan to me. What is it about her that's African American? She will milk that for all it's worth. But I don't see her as part of that community, honestly. Now people would say, well, it doesn't matter, she's married to a white man or whatever, but I do think it matters because I don't see anything in her background that says she comes from that community. I mean, at least Barack Obama, yes, he was raised by, white grandparents, but when he married Michelle, I mean, he was part of a black community, and he went to that horrible church, but he was part of a black community. He understood the black experience. At least you could say that for him. But for her, I mean, she was privileged all her life. What is she talking about? She's a white woman with a tan. That's what it looks like to me. And so it's like milking that I'm an African American. Really? I don't like it. Okay, there's so much more I could say about her, but I did read this one other thing, and this was a former Obama speechwriter. And they're trying, the people promoting her, trying to say she's a moderate. And he pointed out she has one of the most liberal records in the U.S. Senate. According to GovTrack, Harris does indeed have one of the most liberal records in the U.S. Senate, even more liberal than fellow Senator Bernie Sanders. And out of the Democratic senators, Harris was the least likely to join bipartisan bills. So she doesn't work with the other side, and can you imagine the little petty dictator she'd try to be as president? Oh, and here's another thing. I saw a bill that she introduced August 6th, 2020. That's this month, people. It's a Senate bill. I couldn't get the text of it, but it says, a bill to ensure climate and environmental justice, accountability, and for other purposes. We have all this stuff going on right now, and she is the sponsor of that bill. The sponsor. That's disgusting. I keep saying disgusting, but that's disgusting means it's like your visceral reaction. That's my visceral reaction. I do not like her. Okay, here's something cool. I needed to go to LabCorp, which is a place where you can get a blood test. So I did that Tuesday. I made my appointment. Drove, it's local. It was just anyway, I go in there. And it says mask. It's like a medical building. I thought, I didn't think to bring a mask. Whatever. They'll give me one. But I go into the elevator. I don't have a mask. There's a guy in there with a mask, and he was friendly. He didn't seem to be bothered that I didn't have a mask. I walk in, fully expecting them to tell me, you got to put a mask on. And I would say, okay, could you have one for me? Nobody said a word the entire time. While I was in there, while I was getting my blood test, when I was going in the elevator, when I was walking through the building, passing people, nobody said a word. Or looked askance at me. Not at all. They were all friendly. I thought, well, that's interesting. So I'm just going to try it sometime. Because I was all ready to say, I'm sorry, I forgot. So when I went to Gelson's, which is the local grocery store here, on my Friday morning run, so what I do is I put it on, and after I get past the person at the front door, because that's their job, I understand that, I gotta say something, I put it below my nose. And I was kind of disappointed, because I'm smiling at people, they can't see I'm smiling, but I'm friendly. I was kind of hoping that somebody would say something, but I wasn't mad. I felt playful. So, here's what I'm gonna say. Excusez-moi, je ne comprends pas anglais, je parle français. Pardonnez-moi. I was gonna use French. And I was just chuckling to myself, thinking, if somebody says something, I'm gonna pretend I don't understand. But I never got to use my 4 years of college French. High school French. Anyway. There was an interesting thing. I was listening to the Five. I don't always listen to the Five, but I do like to hear Greg Gutfeld. But I had it on just now. And they, on Fan Mail Friday or whatever, they had a question. What was your last dream or nightmare about? And the leftist person they've had on the last 2 nights, it's interesting, they don't ever spell out their names. So it's like Marie Hart or Harf. I like her better than Juan Williams, because at least she's a little more interesting, but she's still definitely a leftist. But here's what she said, and it was actually kind of eye-opening to me, because your dreams do tell a lot about what your unconscious is thinking. She said, and I wrote this down, last night I had a dream that I was hanging out with my high school friends, but they weren't wearing masks, and I was very stressed about it. Wow. So people on the left, apparently, they're really scared about this. So in her dream, she is stressed that her high school friends, because obviously if you're having a dream about your high school friends, you never saw them in masks. So, but she knew something was wrong. Anyway, she's stressed about it in her sleep. And she went on about some other parts of the dream that aren't relevant to this, but Jesse Waters said, you need a vacation. And I thought, oh my God, wow. And I looked at her differently after that. I looked at her face, and I saw the face of a scared young woman. I actually felt sympathy, I think. I don't know that I like her views. But I think the left has succeeded in scaring a lot of people. And yet, think about how much more scary it is, because I saw on Twitter, people getting a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. Just, I guess that's pretty bad. It means it's spread. Those things are major deadly stuff when it's advanced like that. And you're gonna worry about masks when almost nobody your age dies of this, unless there's other problems. Wow. And here's another thing. Gosh, there's so much I want to talk about. One of the things I hear people, let's say, that are complaining about cancel culture or whatever, on Fox or on some YouTube videos, they'll say, gosh, you can't say this or they're going to call you a racist. And I really bristle at that. What do you mean you can't say this? Don't give them that power. I'm not worried about anybody thinking I'm a racist. Because if you're worried about how people will label you, then you've just given them that power. So what if they call you a racist? You know you're not a racist. Just laugh at them. You can't say. Anytime anybody says that, I'm like, what are you talking about? You can't say. Yes, you can. Say it. You can't say. Haven't you noticed that? What do you think of that? Any of you have any other ideas about that? I'd be interested in hearing. Okay? And here is something else. And I watched it twice. I saw on Andrew Clavin, he interviewed Michael Barnes, who made a documentary about Roger Ailes. Now there have been 2 movies or whatever on mainstream movies. I know one I saw, The Loudest Voice, about Roger Ailes. And it really focused on how he built up Fox News. And it was played by, Roger Ailes was played by Russell Crowe. So it was actually pretty good. But it did make him seem very, how should I say, sleazy sexually in harassing the women. Although there were some places I thought, well, wait a minute. Now the reason I was interested in Roger Ailes was because when I first started giving speeches, and this is very important for all of us, okay? For all of us who want to get our ideas out there, it was the best speech book I ever read. The best. And it was called You Are the Message. And really what the message of that was, it's not just about what you say, but who are you? What are you presenting to the audience? And that's very, very important. And you can see I do that with these videos. This suits me. This platform suits me. When I'm talking to you, as far as I can tell, I'm myself. In other words, I'm doing what I'm not trying to be somebody I'm not. And when I absorb that, and you look at people who are really good at what they do. But anyway, Michael Barnes made a documentary. And he said you could go to themaninthearena.com or whatever and get it. But he alluded to the fact that it's on Amazon Prime. So I didn't immediately see it on Amazon Prime, but by doing the search thing, where you have to type it in, The Man in the Arena. Got that? The Man in the Arena. And you can rent it for $5. I purchased it for $15 because I wanted to watch it again. I don't want to have a time limit. That is such a good documentary. And I actually learned a lot. I had no idea. I knew that he helped Ronald Reagan in his second debate because he came off really feeble-minded, if you will, in the first debate, and he helped Ronald Reagan win the second debate. I knew about that, and he was famous for that. And of course, I knew about Fox. But oh my gosh, this guy did so much. And so it's a whole history of the television era and how do you present yourself, whatever. I didn't realize he was the one that built up CNBC, the financial, and he basically, in his own way, started MSNBC because he started the talk show. And he really wanted things fair and balanced. So he had met everybody throughout his career. So he had like a talk show, and there were people, it's really interesting to see the people that he met with, Bill Maher and Martin Luther King when he was at Michael Douglas show. I mean, he met everybody. And he was very fair and interesting. Boy George, it was fascinating. But what I didn't know is how he helped Nixon in 1968. That was fascinating to watch. But here's the thing. So Nixon had lost in California numerous times. He lost to John Kennedy in the debates, and he said, I don't want to be packaged, blah, blah, blah. But here's what I love about what Roger Ailes did, is he didn't try to package Richard Nixon in 1968. He observed Nixon, and he said, where is he most comfortable? What are his strengths? And it was to be strong and knowledgeable in his resolve. So he actually put him in the middle with people asking him questions. No podium, because he found that Nixon was good when he could kind of battle somebody. So even if he got hostile questions, Nixon was good in handling it. And Nixon did, he sounded really good. And he did, so he invented essentially, he did invent the town hall. Roger Ailes invented the town hall format. I never knew that. I never knew his role in the Nixon campaign. He also helped George H.W. Bush in 1988. He didn't do the Willie Horton ads, that was Atwater. That was an independent group. But, everybody was talking about George H.W. Bush being a wimp. So in 1988, he got footage, and he made a little movie, the first time there was a movie done in a convention about what he did as a pilot in World War II. I didn't know he was responsible. I didn't know he started the movies, because I remember they did that, The Man from Hope, during the Clinton campaign in 1992. He didn't, but he was amazing. And also, when they interviewed people, everybody talked about how he had your back. He was a very loyal, really a great guy, okay? And as on the left, hated him. And as I was watching it, I thought, oh my God, they hated him the same way they hate Donald Trump. They hated him the same way and did to him the same thing they're trying to do to Donald Trump. So I really hope people watch this documentary. It's fascinating. Only $5, people. The Man in the Arena. You'll learn a lot. You'll be inspired. And notice this media bias against somebody who is really for us, and what they will do to try to destroy someone. That was going on long before Donald Trump. But I really like Roger Ailes. I really like him a lot. He had a great life. And here's the thing, I never knew this, he was a hemophiliac. He was a hemophiliac all his life. So that was interesting. And so when he did fall after he was booted out of Fox. He did fall and hit his head in the bathroom. He was older, and he had like a cerebral hemorrhage. Well, yeah, he was hemophiliac. They couldn't stop the bleeding. But I never knew about that. I guess why that information didn't get out, I don't know. Okay, one more thing. I think another big issue, I mean, it's an important issue, but it's not one I've been following or I know much about because it hasn't impacted my life in any way. But the young people are very much a new issue, and I really learned this from my niece Julie, who's in college, 19-year-old niece, and she's in college in Utah, and she said, you know, it's all about save the children. And so she got me learning about that, and it's a huge issue now with a lot of young people, and Trump has been good on this. The Trump administration has been addressing this, and apparently no other administration has been doing it. So, I mean, I just read this. I haven't verified it, but it says every 30 seconds a child goes missing in America. So they're really into this pedophile, Hollywood pedophile. I mean, there's all kinds of conspiracy things. I mean, they think maybe Oprah. I mean, I don't go there. I don't think that's necessarily true, but they're thinking Tom Hanks, Oprah Winfrey. And I said, well, I don't know about those people. That doesn't, I mean, I couldn't imagine people like that. But it's kind of interesting that a lot of young people are into this issue now. And you know what's interesting about this, and I tweeted it, this is the first issue in a while that's like a real issue for young people to get involved in. Because when I think about, you know, Extinction Rebellion, you know, worried about climate change, that's not a real issue. When I think about institutional racism, that's not a real issue. When I think about police brutality against blacks, I mean, the numbers don't support that. As Heather McDonald so carefully has documented, and others have documented, you just look at the numbers, that's not a real issue. These are issues that young people have taken on as a cause. But this issue is important. And there have been, like in Hollywood, there have been these mass rallies. So I'm starting to follow this a little bit, but on just a practical basis, this is a plus for Trump. This is a plus for our president. And I'm not saying that's the only, I mean, I think the fact that this very important issue apparently that I was not aware of, and I thank Julie for for making me aware of this, is, well, you know, it's horrible. Anything that can help the kids. And if kids are getting abducted or put into sexual slavery, basically, that's disgusting. I mean, I keep saying disgusting. Yeah, it is. It's horrible, and we need to do something about it. And to bring this to light, maybe that's a really, really good thing. Maybe that's a really good thing. And finally, in closing, let me just say, that was so nice what so many of you did. And I just think about some of the letters that I get. I call them letters. I am so touched. I can't even begin to say. So supportive, so wonderful. I mean, there's so many of you, but let me just mention this, like Julia McLaughlin. I feel like I'm having morning coffee with a very smart, calm friend. I reread that this morning and I thought, wow. Thank you, Julie. I mean, how could I not do this? I mean, Anna Hubler, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right, but we gotta get together sometime. She's a dentist in Glendale, and she's always very supportive. And then Crystal Clark, I think she just finally wrote me, but she says she's been watching all my videos. Wow, since my Christine Blasey Ford video. That was a long time ago. And she's watched all my videos, and she just said so many nice things, and to think that I'm sort of having this connection with people. And there's a lot of guys too that have just been around, like Michael. Oh my gosh, Michael, you always tell me good things. Eric, Andy's always very sweet. I mean, there's just so many of you, and I love it. I love it. And I also so appreciate that you said, you know what, don't worry if you don't have time to answer. Because that was actually pretty nice for me. Because I know sometimes I need to do something else. So I've been studying some science and some other things, and my brain needs to do that. I need to memorize things. I need to work my brain in addition to my body, and I have to take a break, as we all do, okay? These are very interesting times. I have so much to say. Okay, I know I should quit now because this is going to be my longest video. But here's it. I'm going to leave you on a good note. I was just reading something somewhere. I'm reading so much stuff, so I don't remember where I read it. But they pointed out that Ronald Reagan became, and you know, he's a conservative. He became governor of California after the riots. That whenever there have been riots in a city, that's when more conservatives get voted in. So that's interesting. Very interesting. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to vote these Democrats out. And I think it's going to be a lot of people. A lot of people. So we'll have to see. I got to have faith in the American people. I have to have faith. Okay? We're going to win this battle. And there'll be more battles. It's a never-ending thing. It's called life, folks. Okay, Andy, don't be freaked out. See you later. See you next week.